Scotland's landscape is dotted with large numbers of old abandoned churches. This is partly due to the population from the countryside moving into the cities and towns due to the Industrial Revolution. Perhaps the most famous old church is the one at Alloway, associated with Robert Burns and William Burns' father, as well as the famous poem Tam O'Shanter. Robert always knew it as a ruin. In fact, he was part of the congregation, together with his father and the rest of the family, of the old church in Ayr. Being a pre-Reformation church, there's a holy water stoop on the outside of the building. The gravestone here of William Burns is actually the third one. The previous two had to be replaced because of the number of chips of stone taken off by the souvenir hunters. Also, the rafters of the ruins of the old church were taken and were converted into Robert Burns souvenirs. There are a couple of mort safes inside the old church. These were once used to deter body snatchers. Also, the bull that got trapped in the church, known as Clootie, one of his horns has been preserved, and it's said that his bellows from inside the church partly gave rise to the story of Tam O'Shanter. On the summit of the castle hill to Ardrossan is the remains of the old parish church, a simple rectangular building with a small cemetery nearby. During excavations, a magnificent carved lid of a coffin was found. This is now kept in the North Ayrshire Heritage Centre. A nearly forgotten family I thought were buried here are the Montfords of Montford. You can see the remains of their old castle as you come down the bypass towards Ardrossan South Beach. The old Kirk stands right next to the new church. It had lost its roof, but it was rebuilt as a museum, now sadly closed. Joined to it is the mausoleum of the Boswell family. This is where James Boswell, the famous biographer of Samuel Johnson, is buried. A very fine example of an armorial panel is present on the gable end of the mausoleum. This shows the interrelationships between the number of aristocratic families with the Boswells, such as the Cunninghams. The 12th century tower of what was St John the Baptist Church lies within Cromwell's old citadel. The troops there used it as a lookout tower, and the building was used as a storehouse, whilst Cromwell built a new church, now known as the Ayr Old Kirk. After Cromwell's fort was abandoned, it was used for a while as a private house, but was then restored to the condition you see it now. Part of the old Kirk at Ballantrae was used to form the Barkip Island monument. This was to Gilbert Kennedy, who had been killed in 1601 in a feud with his relatives from Culzean Castle. Church law had changed to prevent burial within the churches themselves, however this didn't apply to old abandoned kirks. A number of aristocratic families took old kirks and used them to build what are known as aisles, such as the Skelmley Aisle at Largs and the Glencairn Aisle at Kilmores. The Barkip Aisle at Ballantrae therefore contains the mural monument to Gilbert Kennedy and his wife. It was probably built just after the one at Glencairn Aisle in Kilmores, and was probably constructed by the same master mason. It has a number of similarities. The old church at Barkip, better known these days as the Den, not far from Beith, is an example of a building that had a dual use. During the week it was used as the local school, the Barony of Curzlan School, but at the weekends or on Sundays it was used as the church. The Den was once a thriving mining community with several miners' rows. There were a couple of shops, a couple of pubs, a police station, even a bowling green. Sadly, the decline of mining, most of the population moved away. As you can see, what was once the centre of the community is now a total ruin. Barnwell Kirk, near Craigie, was abandoned when the parish was joined with that of Stair. The famous Presbyterian minister of the Reformation, John Knox, once preached here. The surrounding cemetery remained in use until comparatively recent times. The name Barnwell is said to come from when William Wallace was watching the burning of the barns at Ayr and said in a strong Scotch accent, "They burn well." Lochlan's lies above Beith. At one time there was a chapel here, as well as a small churchyard, but nothing now remains of either. Built into the walls of what is now a ruined farm, also a cross used to be present. That's also now been lost. The presence of this chapel may be an example of the Catholic Church's policy of having a religious establishment built where there was a pagan site, because nearby there used to be a stone circle. Another stone circle, a long cairn, and a rocking stone were also once present on the hill above. Beith's old parish kirk stands in the centre of the town. It's built on the site of the old St. Inan's chapel. A more modern church now overlooks it, and the remains are divided into two separate mausoleums or aisles. One of them contains the Sheddens, the Patricks, the Patrick Shedden family, whilst the other is for the Montgomerys of Giffen Castle. At the back of one of the aisles is a memorial to the Spiers family. Most of the children died young, the oldest only living into his 20s. The name is retained in that of the old school grounds outside Beith. Chapeltoun, once known as Templeland, stands quite close to Sturton. Nothing now remains of either the chapel or the graveyard. The nearby Chapel Hill was probably an estate feature added in the early 19th century. However, when the old Chapeltoun House was being demolished, the remains of the chapel were found within it. And when the road and the bridge over the River Annick were being built, they uncovered a number of graves. So this is probably the site of the old graveyard. The ruins of Closeburn Kirk lie close to the Victorian replacement. The kirk itself became the mausoleum of the Kirkpatrick family. Above the entrance is carved their symbol, a bloody dagger, and their motto, I make sure. This relates to the incident where, in Dumfries, Robert the Bruce is thought to have killed the Red Comyn within the church, but to make sure, Roger de Kirkpatrick went in and stabbed him with his dagger. Sentry boxes at the entrance once housed watchmen keeping an eye out for body snatchers. The old Coulton Parish Church has an archway surviving, and also part of the building was converted into the aisle of the Hamiltons of Sundrum. Nearby is another mausoleum, but not part of the old church, to the Charmer family of Gadgirth. One of the gravestones carries the name Kilpatrick, and this was a relative of Nellie Kilpatrick. She was said to be the first female interest of Robert Burns. The Kilpatrick family originally were at Mill Mannoch, which translates as the Mill of the Monks, and this stands not far from Mount Oliphant, where the Burns family lived. Cregledon Kirk lies not far from Whithorn in Dumfries and Galloway. It's an unusual example that it was a total ruin, but it was rebuilt by the Marquis of Bute. It's thought there was a village, but nothing now remains of that. The castle stands above, in total ruins, overlooking the sea. A line of tiles laid into the bottom of the walls shows the height of the original wall before rebuilding started. It is still used for weddings and so on, and there's said to be at least one religious service per year.